Please take my puppy.
Please take my puppy. She tried to leave her dog at his door. The rich cowboy whispered, "You stay too." Northern New Mexico Territory. Winter, 1884. Midnight hush over wind-swept plains. The wind drifted low over the prairie, brushing through dry brush and brittle stalks like the quiet breath of something long forgotten. A crescent moon hung pale above the horizon, veiled by slow-moving clouds. The land stretched silent beneath it, vast, hollow, and cold. She came walking out of the darkness. Leora Dane, just 18, barefoot, beneath a pair of broken boots, trudged across the dirt path, leading toward a grand wooden gate. Her figure was thin, slight, the cotton hem of her faded dress stained with ash and old soil. An old wool sweater hung off her shoulders, full of holes. Her hair was a tangle that no comb had seen in weeks. Her lips were cracked, her breath visible in the night air. In her arms, wrapped inside a worn flour sack, was a puppy. The dog was small, cream-colored, with eyes too big for its skull. Its ribs showed through its fur. It shook violently, not from fear but from cold and hunger. Leora clutched him tighter to her chest as she stopped beneath the wooden arch of the ranch gate. Etched into the iron was a name, McLean Ranch. She had never spoken to the man who owned this land. But she had heard stories. Sawyer McLean, a Civil War cavalryman turned rancher, wealthy, alone, said to be rough but kind if you caught him right. Leora had no other choice. There was no one else in 30 miles who might take in a dying dog. Her hands trembled as she pulled a small, torn scrap of paper from her pocket. Written hastily, crooked from the pain in her fingers. "Plels, take my puppy. He's good, he's quiet. I can't feed him no more." She tied it around the dog's neck with a piece of string from her waistband. Then she crouched down, slowly, gently lowering the dog to the frosted ground just inside the fence line. The pup whined at once, trying to climb back into her arms. "No, Beans," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No, baby, you have to stay." Beans pawed at her skirt, then let out a low whimper that shattered something inside her. His eyes, round, wet, pleading, glimmered in the moonlight. She knelt, cupped his face in her chapped hands. "I am so sorry," she murmured. "I never meant to let this happen. I wanted to keep you forever." The dog whimpered louder, pressing his nose against her palm. "Listen to me," she choked, pressing her forehead to his. "If he yells, don't be scared. Just curl up and stay quiet. Eat whatever he gives you. Eat, Beans. Grow big. Be good, please." Her hands lingered, fingers splayed across his trembling ribs. "I promise. I'll come back, if I'm still breathing." Beans gave a tiny bark, barely more than air. He licked her cheek once. She leaned in, kissed the top of his narrow head, then stood, then ran. She did not look back. Her breath tore out of her lungs as her boots slapped the hard ground. Her arms wrapped around her stomach as if to hold something inside from breaking loose. Her vision blurred with the tears she had tried so hard to save. Behind her, Beans sat, tail tucked, head low, the note fluttering gently from his collar in the cold breeze. Not a single light flickered from the house at the top of the hill. But the ranch was watching. Leora had only made it a few steps from the gate when she heard it. That deep creak of wood groaning under weight, the unmistakable sound of a heavy door swinging open. Her breath caught. Her boots froze in the dust. Then came the voice. It was not loud, but it carried like thunder through the still night. "The dog cannot stay if the girl walks away." She turned, slowly, heart hammering against her ribs. A man stood beneath the shadowed porch, the lantern light behind him casting his frame in bronze and black. He was tall, broad at the shoulders, wearing a long sheepskin duster that brushed against his boots. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but his voice, calm, slow, firm, was already etched into her bones. He stepped down the porch steps with the heavy, deliberate grace of someone who had once moved through war. The moonlight caught the side of his face, and she saw the sharp cut of his jaw, the faint scar along his cheekbone, the gray steel of his eyes. Sawyer McLean. She had heard his name whispered like a question in town, the subject of speculation and old stories. He had fought in the cavalry, returned alone, built this ranch with his bare hands. People said he had a grave behind the barn where his wife lay buried, but no one ever asked. He didn't speak again right away. He walked past her toward the gate, then crouched down and lifted Beans gently from the cold earth. The dog whimpered softly in his arms. "He didn't want you to go," Sawyer said, eyes on the puppy. "And I have a feeling you don't want to go either." Leora's throat closed. Her fingers curled into fists. "I wasn't leaving him," she said quickly. I don't have anything left to feed him. I thought, maybe you could." Her voice broke off. She hated the sound of herself begging. "I am not asking for money," she added, quieter. "I am not trying to take advantage." He turned to face her then. Not sharply, not with judgment. With stillness. "You brought him here in the middle of the night, in the dead of winter," he said. "That tells me more than enough." She stepped back a little. Her legs trembled from the cold and the shame. "I should go," she murmured. "This was a mistake." She turned, took one step, and felt it, his hand closing gently around her wrist. Not to hurt. Not to stop. Just to steady. His hand was big, calloused, warm even in the chill. She tried to pull away, but his grip was firm without force. He spoke again, softer this time. "There are some gifts in this world that you don't sell, and you sure as hell don't abandon." She looked up at him. His eyes weren't angry, just tired and quiet, and maybe, just maybe, lonely. He let go of her wrist, slowly. Then, holding Beans with one arm, he gestured toward the house with a slight motion of his head. "Come inside," he said. "You look like you've been running from the devil himself." She didn't move. Her mind was screaming to flee, but her feet refused. "I don't know what you think I can offer," she said, voice barely audible. "I don't know what you want in return." He didn't flinch, just looked her square in the eye. "Maybe," he said. "I do not want anything but to not find a dead pup on my porch come morning." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, painfully, she nodded and followed him home. The kitchen was small but sturdy, built from aged pine and heavy beams. The wood stove snapped and hissed as it burned. Dim lamplight flickered against the walls, casting long shadows across the plank floor. The smell of smoke and old coffee lingered in the air. Leora sat on a low stool beside the fire, her knees drawn to her chest. Her dress was still damp at the hem. One of her boots had started to come apart at the sole. She held her hands close to the stove, though the heat made her fingertips sting. Beans lay curled in Sawyer's lap, tucked inside the warmth of his duster coat. The pup had stopped shaking. His eyes were closed now, breath slow and steady, as if the worst part of the storm had passed. Sawyer sat across from her at the table, silent. He had not asked questions. He had not offered comfort either, not in words, just warmth, shelter, firelight. She stared into the flames for a long time before she spoke. "My daddy was a carpenter," she began, voice rough from cold and sleep. "Built houses with his bare hands, barns too. Used to say wood talked back if you listened close enough." She glanced at the floor. Her fingers gripped the edge of her skirt. Then came the drought. Everything dried up. Land, crops, orders. One night, a spark from a stovepipe caught the shop, burned it down. Insurance man never came. After that, he started drinking. She looked up, her eyes dull but steady. And when he drank, he hit. When he didn't have money to drink, he gambled. Then he hit harder. Sawyer didn't move. Beans shifted slightly in his lap. We sold the chickens, the horse, even Mama's sewing machine. I worked where I could, scrubbing floors, hauling water for bathhouses, picking dry weeds from graves if someone paid me a coin. Her voice faltered, then steadied again. But when Mama got sick last spring, it got worse. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her hair falling over one side of her face. She coughs blood now, can't walk, can't eat much. I traded every piece of furniture we had for medicine, half of it probably useless. I even sold. Her mouth twisted. I sold her wedding ring, just to buy firewood for a week. The words came slower now, like her body was giving out with each one. All I had left was beans. Someone gave him to me when Mama first got sick, said he'd keep her warm at night if nothing else. I never meant to give him up, not ever. Her eyes shone in the firelight, but she refused to cry. I just didn't want him to die with us. Sawyer stood slowly and walked to the counter. He poured milk into a tin mug and slid it across the table, then added a warm slice of cornbread from a cloth-wrapped bundle. Leora stared at it like it was a feast. Her hands hovered over the mug. "Thank you," she whispered. I haven't had fresh milk in months." She took a sip, closed her eyes, then bit into the bread with a quiet, disbelieving sound that bordered on reverence. Sawyer leaned back in his chair, his eyes still unreadable beneath the shadow of his brow. "I don't like asking for help," she said softly, "but I would starve before I let that dog go hungry." Then, almost as an afterthought, "I do not want anyone else touching him. He's all I have." There was silence for a long time. Sawyer looked down at the sleeping puppy in his lap. His hand moved gently along its back. Then he looked at her. "Then don't let anyone else touch him," he said quietly. "Stay, feed him, take care of him, and maybe, if you're willing, take care of yourself too." Leora blinked. No one had said that to her in years. She reached for the mug again, holding it close. And for the first time that night, her hands stopped shaking. The loft room at the end of the hall was small and slanted, its low ceiling just brushing the top of Leora's head when she stood. The walls were made of rough, dark wood, dotted with old nail holes and cobweb corners. A single window opened to the east, catching the thin gray of morning light. The mattress was stuffed with dry straw, scratchy beneath a patched quilt. But it was warm, and it was hers. To Leora Dane, it was nothing short of paradise. She awoke before the rooster crowed, hands stiff from the cold but heart unburdened. Morning fog wrapped the land like a wool blanket, and from the window she could see the silhouettes of horses grazing, their breaths rising in soft puffs. It was her first morning in a world that did not feel like it was closing in on her. By noon, she was on her feet. Mrs. Bly, the housekeeper, round-bellied and sharp-tongued, put her to work right away, though not unkindly. Leora stoked the kitchen stove with firewood, washed vegetables in cold buckets out back, helped gather eggs, and learned to calm a skittish mare in the stable without speaking a word. Her hands ached, her back throbbed, but she did not mind. Beans, once skin and bone, now had a bounce in his steps and a shine in his coat. He followed Sawyer around the property like a shadow with a tail. When Sawyer whistled, the dog came running, ears flopping, tail wagging like it might never stop. Sawyer himself had changed, if only slightly. He spoke more, ate more, And at least once a day, Leora would catch him smiling quietly to himself, leaning on the porch railing and watching the hills roll into the sky. Each night, after supper, Leora would return to her loft and pull the covers tight. Not because she was cold, but because something inside her, something long frozen, had begun to thaw, and she was afraid it might spill out. One evening, as dusk painted the barn in copper and blue, Sawyer returned late from checking the north fence. He left his coat on the back of the kitchen chair. Leora passed by it without thinking, until she saw the sleeve. The fabric had torn clean along the seam. Threads frayed, stitching busted wide like something ripped in anger. She hesitated only a moment, then carried it upstairs. In her sewing pouch, one of the last things she had kept when they sold everything, was a small spool of red thread. It was the only color she had. Her fingers were clumsy, her stitches uneven, but the line held. She worked until the room was nearly dark, then folded the coat and hung it back neatly in the same place she found it. The next evening, when she returned to her room, she found a bundle waiting on her bed. A warm loaf of cornbread, wrapped in cloth, and a thick wool blanket, neatly folded. She turned to find Sawyer standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets. He didn't smile. He didn't explain. Just said, in his low, gravel-warm voice, "You sew well, but let me worry about the blankets. You just make sure your mother stays warm." She blinked once, twice, then nodded. Each night after that, she began collecting scraps from dinner. An extra slice of bread, half a roasted potato, a corner of meat not touched. She wrapped them in a faded handkerchief, knotted tightly, and slipped out into the cold. Her mother still lived in the old shed she had found outside town. Drafty, leaking, barely a shelter at all. But her heart still beat, and her daughter still came. Every time Leora opened that door and handed her the bundle, her mother's eyes welled with tears. "Lord above," her mother whispered, "who feeds you that you still think of feeding me?" Leora smiled softly, knelt beside the straw bed, and kissed her mother's forehead. "There's someone," she said. "He does not ask. He does not expect anything back. He just helps." Her mother looked off toward the hills, her voice barely a breath. "Sometimes, child, blessings come dressed in old pain, or a pair of worn-out boots." Leora held her hand until the fire died down, then walked back toward the only place in the world where the door had not shut on her. The wind that afternoon was soft, not sharp like the nights before. It carried the smell of dry hay and sun-warmed earth. The low grass rustled around their boots as Sawyer led Leora across the southern field, past the stables and tool sheds, toward the main house once more. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Sawyer walked with his hands behind his back, his long stride steady, unhurried. Leora followed beside him, her eyes flicking from the fence lines to the horizon to the corner of the house where the porch curled around like a waiting arm. He stopped near a side door and motioned her forward. She stepped in and looked around. The room was simple, dusty, yes, but clean. Wooden floor, bare walls, a small writing desk in the corner. A window faced the pasture, where the sun was just beginning to fall into gold. There was a bed in the corner, made up with clean linen, and a folded quilt at the foot. Sawyer's voice broke the quiet. "This used to be hers," he said. Leora turned to look at him. "My wife's," he clarified, more gently. "She was sick, long time ago. This room's been empty since." She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. He stood still for a moment longer, then finally said, "Bring your mother here. There's warmth, there's medicine, and she won't be alone." The words landed heavy, not in tone, but in meaning, like something long held in his chest was being passed forward. Leora stepped back, just half a step, her hands tightening around the hem of her dress. She wanted to say yes. Desperately. But what she felt instead was a pressure she could not name. A weight, not from him, but from herself. He had given her a room, given her food, given Beans a second chance. And now, her mother? I cannot, she said quietly. Her voice cracked despite the stillness around them. I owe you too much already. Sawyer didn't move. He only looked at her, with that quiet, unreadable gaze of his. You do not owe me anything, he said finally. I once stood where you are. No land, no home. Nothing but what I could carry. He paused, voice softening more. And someone helped me. No questions, no price. Just handed me a piece of their kindness. His eyes met hers. I have not had many chances to repay that. Maybe this is one. It was not a command, not a plea, just a truth. That evening, Leora led her mother through the ranch gate. Her mother's legs could barely hold her, so she leaned heavily into her daughter's side. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale, almost translucent, but her eyes still searched. When they stepped into the room, her mother stopped. She looked at the sunlight streaming through the clean glass, at the bed already made, at the vase of dried lavender on the windowsill, and then at Leora, who stood straighter now than she had in months. Her mother reached for her hand, and her voice trembled. You have eaten, haven't you? Leora smiled. Not a big smile. Not the smile of someone who had won anything, but a smile that came from someplace inside her that she thought had long gone to ash. She nodded. Yes, Mama, I have. And her mother wept. She wept in silence, with both hands pressed to her mouth, as if afraid that too much noise might break the moment. And Leora just stood there, hand in hand, smiling still, for the first time in years. The air was still and warm, the sky wide and open above the McLean ranch. Horses grazed lazily in the distance. Beans was asleep under the porch. Leora had just finished hanging a basket of linens on the fence to dry, the sun painting the cotton pale gold. Then came the thunder. Hooves, fast, furious, tearing up the dirt road. Leora turned at the sound, and her heart dropped. A man on a broken-down chestnut horse came riding hard toward the front gate. His shirt was open at the collar, sweat-stained, his boots mismatched, his beard unshaven, hands shaking. And his eyes, bloodshot, wild, found her like a hound scenting prey. He dismounted sloppily, half stumbling into the gatepost. "Leora!" he bellowed. "Girl, you come out here. Now!" Her feet wouldn't move. She stood frozen, the wind tugging gently at her skirt, as if to nudge her back inside. He was her father. The last time she had seen him, he had been passed out on their floor, a bottle in one hand and the deed to their home in the other. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled, slamming a palm against the gate. "Leaving me out there like a damn dog while you shack up with some rich bastard?" His voice cracked into a shout. "She's my daughter. You hear me, McLean? Mine." Behind her, a door creaked open. Boots sounded across the porch. Sawyer McLean walked forward, not fast, not slow, no gun on his hip, no rage in his step. But there was something in his eyes, something like steel drawn from fire. He stopped beside Leora and didn't touch her, didn't need to. Just looked her father in the eye. "She does not belong to you anymore," Sawyer said evenly. The older man sneered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You think she's yours now? Just 'cause you feed her? Put her in a dress? You think you can buy people, like cattle?" Sawyer's voice dropped lower. Colder. "I did not buy her," he said. "I opened my door when she had nowhere to go." Leora stood silent. Her knees felt like straw. her hands clenched in her apron until her knuckles went white. Her father stepped forward, just one stride, but it was enough to make Beans bark once from under the porch. That was all Sawyer needed. He took a single step ahead of Leora, putting himself directly between her and the man who once called himself her kin. "You may be her blood," Sawyer said, voice barely above a growl, "but I'm the man standing between her and the thing she fears." There was no challenge in his stance. Just truth. And finality. The gate creaked open as Mrs. Bly appeared behind them, her arms crossed. "You best leave now, Mr. Dane," she said, "before you shame yourself further." Leora's father looked from face to face, chest heaving. The fight in him began to fade, folding under the weight of his own disgrace. He spat into the dirt, then climbed clumsily back onto his horse. "Don't think this is over," he hissed. "Don't think she ain't still mine." But his voice cracked near the end. And he didn't look back when he rode off. Silence followed. Leora's breath came in short, shallow bursts. The world tilted slightly beneath her feet. Then, as if all at once, her body gave way, and she dropped to her knees in the dirt. The tears didn't come. Just the sound of breathing, broken, fast, afraid. Sawyer crouched beside her. He didn't speak right away. Just reached out and took her hand in his. His palm was rough, but steady, strong. And then he whispered, his voice low, meant only for her. "You're safe now. You don't have to be afraid anymore." And for the first time, she believed it. The sky had shifted without warning. What had been soft and golden turned quickly to gray, then near black as thick clouds rolled over the horizon. The first drops fell like warnings, fat, slow, cold. Then the wind came, snapping clothes on the line, bending grass at the root. By the time Leora made it halfway to the stables, the rain had turned fierce, drumming the earth with a steady roar. She slipped inside just as the thunder cracked above her. The scent of hay and horses rushed to meet her, warm and earthy. Her boots left wet prints on the straw-covered floor. "Close it," came Sawyer's voice. He pushed the barn door shut behind them, muscles taut under his soaked shirt. He removed his hat and shook the water off, then leaned against the frame, breath visible in the damp chill. They stood there, side by side in the dimness, as the rain battered the tin roof above them. Neither of them spoke. Leora moved to one of the wooden posts and touched the flank of a brown mare chewing lazily in its stall. The rhythmic sound of the rain was calming, almost hypnotic, but her heart hadn't slowed. She felt him move beside her. Sawyer's shirt was speckled with mud, a streak of it smeared along his jaw from when they had run across the field. Without thinking, she reached for the cloth in her apron pocket, a soft rag she used to wipe tack, and lifted it to his face. Her hand trembled. He did not flinch. He watched her. Leora wiped the mud gently from his cheekbone, then along his jaw, her thumb brushing the edge of his beard. She paused. Sawyer looked at her, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with something deeper, something unspoken. He looked at her not as a girl fallen on hard times, not as the daughter of a drunk or the servant in his kitchen. He looked at her as a woman who had survived things she never should have, a woman who had stayed when she could have run, who had fed others while starving herself, a woman who still stood. Her hand lowered slowly, but her eyes remained locked on his. He didn't smile. She didn't look away. The space between them closed in silence. No promises, no declarations, just the hum of two hearts that no longer needed to explain their reasons. Sawyer leaned in, slow enough to give her every second to move, to turn, to pull away. She didn't. Their foreheads brushed first. Then their lips met, softly, tentatively, like two people learning a language they had never been taught. It was not urgent. It was not desperate. It was reverent. The kiss deepened, only slightly, a hand on her waist, her fingers brushing his chest. The sound of the rain faded beneath the pulse in her ears. When they parted, there was no awkwardness, no fear, just breath, and the understanding that something between them had shifted, wordlessly, permanently. Leora let out a slow exhale and stepped back just an inch. Sawyer didn't try to hold her in place. He only said, quietly, "You can always leave if you want to." Her reply was almost a whisper. "I don't." He nodded once. Then turned, opened a stall, and tossed fresh hay for the horses, like nothing extraordinary had happened. But it had. Because, in a world where everything was taken, this was the first thing she had ever chosen for herself. The house had not been there before. It stood at the southern edge of the property now, where the land sloped gently toward a creek. A small wooden cabin, no bigger than a hay shed, but clean, solid, and warm. The porch faced east to catch the first light. A stovepipe curled smoke into the sky. Sawyer never said he was building it. He just did. No speeches, no promises, just wood, nails, and work. Leora stood by the open gate, watching it through the fog. Her mother was already inside, resting in a proper bed for the first time in over a year. A fresh quilt covered her legs. A jar of dried chamomile sat by the window. Mrs. Bly had insisted on sending tea and biscuits every morning. And Leora, she no longer moved, like someone waiting to be sent away. That morning, the air smelled like rain that had not yet come. Mist curled around the boots at her feet. She turned at the sound of steps and saw Sawyer approaching, his coat unbuttoned, a small box in his hand. He stopped in front of her, eyes unreadable as always, but softer now, more human. He handed her the box. Inside, resting on a piece of folded cloth, was a necklace. A simple leather cord, with a small, round wooden pendant. Carved into it, with uneven but careful strokes, were the words, "Beans and you, always welcome." Her breath caught. She touched the pendant with trembling fingers, then closed the lid slowly. "I thought I was just dropping off a dog," she said, her voice breaking at the edges. He didn't reply. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to leave my heart behind," she whispered. Sawyer took a slow breath, then reached for her hand. "You didn't leave it," he said. "You gave it. I just kept it safe for a while." Behind them, Beans barked joyfully, spinning in circles in the wet grass, tail moving like a flag in the wind. His paws kicked up mud, and he didn't care one bit. He had food, a place to sleep, and the two people he loved most within arm's reach. Sawyer turned toward the porch. Gently, he bent down and lifted Leora's mother into his arms. She was light, feather-thin, but she smiled as he carried her toward the rocking chair just outside the door. The sun was trying to rise, pushing through the fog in shy streaks of pale gold. Leora stood beside them, one hand on Bean's head, the other clutching the pendant close to her chest. She was not a guest anymore. Not a girl, in someone else's home. She was something else now. Someone who belonged. Some loves begin with joy, others with fire, but the rarest kind starts with loss. Because sometimes, it is in what we give away that God writes the beginnings of the families we never thought we'd have. And on a morning soaked in fog and memory, on a porch where the past had finally let go, a girl, a dog, and a man began again. If this story moved your heart, if you felt every tear, every heartbeat, and every quiet moment of healing, don't forget to hit that like button to show your love for Leora, Sawyer, and Little Beans. Let us know in the comments, would you have left the puppy, or stayed too? And if you're drawn to timeless love stories born from dust, danger, and devotion. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale where bullets miss, but hearts never do. Where stories aren't just told, they're felt. This is, and we're just getting started.